Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST. Every day of the week where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some and or a lot of money on the internet. I'm your host, Bchek. I am joined by my legendary co-host, Sammy, today. And we're going to get into everything to do with the NFT and crypto market in just a little bit. But before we do that, as always, just a reminder that nothing that we say here is financial advice because this market is insanely risky. We don't know anything for sure. So please exercise your own judgment and be cautious. Be cautious, be skeptical. Just don't do anything that you shouldn't do. Sammy, with that out of the way, it's Monday. It's the 27th of May. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm good. I can't believe it's almost the end of May, start of June. Summer's arriving. But yeah, no, I'm good. I had a bit of a mixed weekend from socials / farming, so very productive, but not as amazing as your sort of long weekend playing at Old Trafford. Keen to hear more about that.
That was pretty crazy. So obviously I missed the show on Thursday and Friday, which I was very, very upset about. That was the worst thing that could have possibly happened. But on Thursday I was playing at Old Trafford, which is the stadium of Manchester United, the best football team, aka the best soccer team in the world. And that was pretty surreal. I got to play 11-a-side on the actual pitch of the team that I supported as a kid, supported by Tezos. They were they're the blockchain sponsor for Man United. So they'd invited a bunch of people who got to play there. We had breakfast there. We had the game there. We were in the proper changing rooms. We had two old former legends. So maybe this will go completely over people's heads, but Ronnie Johnson and Andy Cole, for the people who are familiar with Manchester United legendary older players. They were our managers and they were kind of standing on the sidelines telling us what to do. And we won 5-4 on the pitch. I had one really good chance to score at Old Trafford and it was on my left foot and I was quite close. I just put it over the bar. Like I struck it really well. But you know how with your opposite foot, Sam, like you almost assume that you're not going to hit it well. So I kind of tried to hit it higher into the goal because I thought I wouldn't hit it well. And then I actually struck it really, really well. And it just went it just went over the crossbar. So that was upsetting that I couldn't get a goal at Old Trafford as well. But otherwise, pretty crazy day for me, to be honest.
Is there any video footage?
No video footage yet. However, there was video footage being taken. So there's video footage. There's like a bunch of official photos coming. So that'll be very, very fun to see in a little bit. There's a few photos. I don't think I've shared them on Twitter yet. I'll probably share them in a bit of like in the tunnel with the Theatre of Dreams sign, which is pretty fun. And then on Friday, I was at Wentworth, which is the golf kind of famous golf course, playing paddle. We were just talking about this game called paddle. It's been taking the UK and Europe by storm, I think. You said you thought that it was like for people who don't know how to play tennis. Is that fair? Is it kind of like pickleball? Do you know what pickleball is?
I've never played pickleball. I've heard is it Easy and Clemente talk about pickleball quite a lot. I have never played it, but I did play something that is similar to it in Jamaica with my partner. So I play tennis, but my partner doesn't, so we had to compromise. Yeah.
I don't know. I was a paddle skeptic before I played. I thought, is this just a game for people who can't play tennis? Which I think that it is. However, it is still a fun game. So we played with 4 people and it was actually very, very fun. So that's what I was doing over on Thursday and Friday. Obviously with a business focus because there were people who I hope to be doing business with sooner rather than later. So not all fun, always a little bit of business angle too. But that was the past few days. We want to get into what's been happening over the weekend. Pretty crazy weekend actually of news. Some like really strange stuff going on. But we're going to get into all of it in just a second. As always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's get into the price action and the headlines. I'm sharing it on screen. We were off YouTube for a couple of days because we just haven't sorted it out, the admin wise, for when I'm not on the show, but that will be sorted soon. So no matter who is hosting, we'll always have YouTube. So we're back on YouTube. We're live on video on X and YouTube as well. Okay, price action. We've got Bitcoin at 68.4K, down 1%. ETH up 2%. at 3.9K, knocking on 4K's door. And Solana is flat down to $165. The first headline is ETH rips past 3.9K again as the other majors stand still. Definitely want to reflect on ETH's position at the moment versus the other majors. Number two, this I didn't see as much on the timeline about. Pepe rips more than 10% to hit a $7.2 billion market cap, and it's up 80% in 7 days. I don't know if anyone's really processed that or been aware of that as much as they should have been, but that is pretty insane. I want to discuss that a little bit more. And number three, Trump declares US must lead on cryptocurrencies and will commute sentence of Russ Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road. A bunch of other commentary about what he was kind of saying. And maybe I mainly want to take this in discussion of these political coins and take a look at those. Don't want to dwell too much on the politics as such, but want to think about the implications for these political coins. The Bonk guy, I don't know how to describe him other than the Bonk guy, has predicted, the one who like made tons and tons of money off Bonk, is predicting political coins to be very big. So I want to reflect on that. Getting into some more price action in terms of NFTs, we've got CryptoPunks at 34.7, Bored Apes at 12.1, Mutants at 2, DGods at 1.3, Captains at 3.2, Azuki's at 4.3, Penguins at 10.6, Mad Lads up a touch at 774, and the Nouns winning bid was at 5.3 ETH. So that is the price action. Those are the headlines, Sammy. Before we get into a discussion on those bigger themes, both on political coins, meme coins, and ETH's position relative to other things, what is catching your attention in the market?
So if we go to the Mintify heat map, I think that, I mean, Blast side is pretty much a sea of red. There's nothing really that's striking my attention outside of Wolfgame. But on the ETH side, the clear decline is Pixelmon. Now, for those that have been following it closely, will know that the Mon protocol token went live this morning. I think it's come out at around about 480 mil fully diluted market cap, or 57 mil market cap. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, based off that, I don't know if there's been a claim and people have dumped post thing, or just the sentiment around that hasn't been as or in line with expectations. But it's a shame we didn't have Legendary on, because he was deep in the trenches on this one. But I mean, that's the clear driver to that price action, and looks like it's pretty savage.
Okay, definitely want to reflect on this a little bit. We've been speaking about, so just to clarify, the NFTs themselves, we're not going to do the maths on the NFTs precisely, but yes, the NFTs are very far down. They're like down 40%, which is to be expected when these types of token generation events happen. But the token itself, as I'm sharing on screen, it's come out at 48 cents. It's a FDV of 480 million. So I guess it's 10% circulating supply. That's not bad. That's like, to come out at almost 500 mil in this market is pretty damn good. However, I have seen takes on the timeline, just trying to find a good friend's take where they said this. What was supposed to be a nice liquidity event turned into me providing liquidity. It appears I'm now a Mon community member. I guess the way people, Sammy, why don't you explain what were people's expectations when it came to these type of events, and why do you think some people might be disappointed? What's your perspective here?
Well, I think we touched on the potential comparisons to what it could come out at, and I think Portal was compared, and that was at around about a 2 billion fully diluted market cap. So if people had the expectation that that's what it was going to come out at, and it's come out at a quarter of that, then obviously people are going to be disappointed. I mean, outside of that, I mean, the market, it's pretty turbulent at the moment. I know we're in that kind of limbo phase with ETH ETFs just been approved, but it was a sell the news event. Has it come back? Like, are we in that prime market for people to be able to absorb all these new tokens coming out, or will they rip later on? Is it better for them to come out at this level, and then as the market rips, they rip with them? Or it's hard to tell. But I think that from the sentiment perspective, if people have had that expectation that that's what it's going to come out at, similar to Portal, or even half of that at a billion, you're still down 50% on what your expectation would be. So that's the only thing that I can potentially imagine. And I know you and I haven't got exposure to Pixelmon. And that's not out of one. Like, it's a great project. We've spoken previously about having our attention spread too thin. And I guess we have our own niches or sub-segments of the market that we're looking into. And I think that those that have put a significant amount of their capital within this particular basket are probably a little bit disappointed. But I don't think that it's necessarily a reflection on the underlying product. I think what they've put out in terms of videos and content, and it feels like they're pretty connected with the market. So I don't see why this couldn't like rip. It couldn't do well. So I'm intrigued to see how it goes from here.
Yeah, like I'm just not having it. Like I think from our understanding, because I think we probably have participated in some other gaming projects, didn't participate in this one, but people were raising anything in the region at valuations, anything between like 30 to maybe 70 mil at the top end. So like, if that's your FDV that you're raising at, anything between 30 and 70, I can't say exactly what Pixelmon was because I frankly don't know. But I suspect it was something in that region because it was the same time that all these other things were taking place. Like if your FDV comes out at 500, that's a win. That's like a guaranteed win. It is not, it might not, I know you'd need to check the maths on this, but it might not get you all of your initial capital back on a 10% TGE, for example. But that doesn't mean that that's not a fantastic investment. But I genuinely think that people have started to think that if you provide any amount of liquidity at a particular date in time, they think that on the TGE, they should get all of their money back right away and then be able to ride for free for the rest of the 90%. And that is just not happening anymore. So I think that's like the real reality check or the wake up call for people. I was speaking to someone privately though, and we're kind of wondering, like, say you don't get all your money back. And obviously with these low float, high FTVs over time, the price tends to trend down. Not saying that happens in every single case, but that seems to be what's happening in with a lot of the evidence that we've seen. If all you end up getting is like a 2x on your capital or a 3x, it's going to hurt, isn't it? When you see ETH has gone from like 3 or late 2K to like almost 4K within what, 10 days or something outrageous. And now the ETF, with the ETF hype, people suspecting that it could go higher. Like it's just that classic meme of like, we're trying to do all these like complex things, and in the end, just holding spot could have been the far easier play. I know for certain for me, I've put my money in things where it's just like, damn, ETH has output. Like you're not only outperforming, the intention is not only to try to outperform the rate of interest or the rate of return. Sometimes it's just, can you outperform the rate of Solana's increase, Bitcoin's increase, and ETH's increase? And I think that's the real challenge to consider whether you're really like savvy investor in this space. It's not like, oh, did you earn 20% every year? It's, have you outperformed ETH? What percentage of outperformance of those things? So that's one of the things I've been thinking about, because I think that's actually the key determination of whether you're a savvy investor in this particular space. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think opportunity cost is huge. And I think locking up your capital within, especially NFTs that are promising a token, it can be, I mean, it can go like, it's so hard to judge which way it's going to go. I think that I agree with you, using ETH as the comparison, as the benchmark is optimal. If this is the industry that we're in, you'd expect us to aim to outperform if we're going to put it into higher risk assets. I think that there's probably, I mean, there's going to be a number of other tokens that come out that aren't going to do very well, but ultimately it depends on what that underlying product is and what they're building. And I think that you mentioned about the TGE and the various vesting schedules, like if you compare it to traditional investing, there's no way you'd expect to get the multiples outside of crypto to get that return at the initial ICO or IPO or whatever. But then again, there is that lower risk that you don't expect the price to continually going down after the token generation event, because you do have these high
Exactly.
FTV, low float launches. So I think there's a bit of a dynamic mix, and that's why people are so keen to get their return from the get-go, because they are concerned that they're just not going to get the return in the long term, because you can't project the same price at TGE for most of these projects for the next 2 years. Like a lot of these projects might not be around after 6 months. Like they might just fold, they might run out of capital, they might do something stupid, or they might get hacked, or there's a higher risk area within this part of the market. So I can see why people are aiming to get the return back, and then it's just not a free ride, but it's just like the capital is pure profit, and you don't mind too much, and you can just leave it, and then you can reinvest that back into something else. And I think that's what we did originally, or a lot of people have done early on, but they're not being able to do that now, and their initial investments are locked up, and now they're getting to the stage where they're running out of capital to then reinvest into the other opportunity plays. So.
And to be fair to the critics, or to be fair to the pessimists, for example, who might be disappointed with this number, we have had 2 examples now of, and this is very, very important for people to be aware of what is happening, and relatively prominent protocols, or at least one, two protocols have basically paused claims for investors. So like, yes, investors were up. Say we invested in a pre-sale at a particular price. Investors relatively quickly got into profit within a few months of the vesting schedule being in place. Price action was negative, and then the teams have decided that's enough of that token. That's enough of giving you the token that you paid for. We are not going to do that anymore. We're just going to press pause, and maybe if you want to get your token, you're going to have a legal battle with us. So that is, I guess, the other flip side of things, where I appreciate people might be like, well, why are you so impatient? That's not like great investor behavior. But at the same time, teams seem to be relatively, again, it's an overgeneralization, but there have been now 2 instances of this. Teams seem to be not unwilling to just ruggy for your tokens if they don't like the kind of price action on the token, or I don't know, whatever internal dynamics is going on. So I think that's important to kind of bring up, so people are aware that yes, people are a little bit impatient in this space, and yes, people might be shooting for the moon and like very high numbers, but it's because of this like aggressive drop off. It's because we're kind of operating in the Wild West, where sometimes teams just take the tokens that you're legally obligated to. So that stuff is happening too. So I think that's an interesting kind of just not a counterpoint, but just more context for people. Anything else on that, Sam? Because otherwise I wanted to touch on a few more things from the heat map and something else you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the cash element. Like, you've got to get the cash in the door. Once you've got the cash in your bank, then it's kind of a lot safer. And that was the same in traditional markets. Like, I had a lot of clients that were worse payers than other ones, and these were like, some of them were listed institutions, and they would just push the boundaries of when the invoicing was due. So I would have to keep chasing them for that business when I was at EY, and it was like the partner then would be like, make sure you get the cash in the door, make sure that you have the payment schedule where they pay us up front. Like, you don't want to be chasing this. And that's on like the institutional level. When you're working with a lot of these startups or like early stage projects, it's even worse. So you just need to get that cash in as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Jose in the comments saying, I've heard Sammy doesn't get out of bed for less than 500 million. I think that's probably true. As you said, you've got to get the cash through the door, and it's got to be more than 500 million for Sammy to be interested. Kalano asked, do you guys have any idea what happens with the points for the Mon mission? That is a question for Legendary, I suspect, Kalano. So we'll ask him, or ask us in the Discord, and maybe someone will have some insight there. I wanted to take the conversation towards, okay, so we looked at the heat map. Everything else is kind of red/stable on the ETH side. You mentioned Blast, Sam, and I thought it would be helpful to maybe just go over there for a second, because there is one game that's kind of taking the timeline by storm on that side of things, and it is Wolf Game. Do you want to give people a bit of a, I don't know, what would you say, like a bit of a primer on like why Wolf Game has taken everyone's attention so much on Blast in the last maybe 48, 72 hours or so?
Yeah, sure. I'll just pin up. So I wrote a thread on it over the weekend.
Nice.
I'll just pin it up to the spaces now so people have access to that. So they've just released Cave Game, which it's not a new game. They did this on ETH. Essentially, what the aim of the game is to accumulate golden points, which, I mean, you could assume that there's been no allocation announced in terms of Blast Gold, but you'd hope that given the amount of people that are playing it, they probably get some sort of allocation. So my bet is that those Blast Golden points, will getting those will work out your allocation for Blast Gold. Now there's about 10,000. No, I think there's about 40,000 Blast sheep minted.
Okay.
So actually the value, I think it's soul bound. So the value, there is no value to the sheep. It's just an asset that you use to play the game. But you can also burn wool, which is their ERC20 token, which is now on Blast as well, to kind of expedite that process of going around the cave. So it's restrained by energy. There's like 4 pieces of equipment that enhance your experience or make it more efficient. And those pieces of equipment basically allow you to see further in front, see beyond walls, blow up walls. So you can effectively go around this maze in the cave and try and find these dig spots to then get points. And that's I think that launched on Saturday. I don't know how many people have played it, but there's now 30 something caves. Each cave has 400 sheep cap. And some of those earlier caves have already been farmed. So there's literally no point doing those anymore. I think I was in cave 4. That was saturated. Okay. I stopped playing on Saturday evening. I automatically got dropped into cave 32, which was like a fresh cave. So I went ham this morning for a couple of hours and collected as much as possible. I think I'm up to like maybe 700,000 gold points or something. I have no idea how.
Okay, but gold points is not like the same as gold, right?
No. So gold points is just the Wolf Games like Blast points kind of thing that they'll basically use internally to allocate gold, I assume. However, they have the Genesis assets coming onto Blast soon, so you'll be able to bridge your wolves and sheep. And my bet is they give probably higher allocations of gold, if they are allocated gold, I'm assuming here, to those particular caves. So I think these earlier caves, while they'll still probably count, they'll probably have some sort of allocation. I don't think it'll be as much as those later caves. So I think this is kind of a trial run, and I think they've been quite smart in the way that they've created golden boxes which you buy with ETH. I suspect they've sold quite a few. I mean, I've bought like 50 or so, and you basically get loads of items, some carrots and milk, which kind of gives you energy to play around this thing and then around the cave. But I think that that will help them build up some sort of ETH treasury, so that whether they'll start giving out ETH rewards, so similar to Fantasy Top, or whether they'll just use that to pay the team, I'm not sure. But ultimately, I think when the wolves and the sheep get bridged, I think that they'll probably convert those golden boxes to be bought with wool or ETH to act as an additional sink for the wool token. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think it all rests on whether it's going to do well based on the Blast Gold allocation. If it's allocated a huge amount, all of a sudden you have a huge amount of interest. If it's quite an underwhelming amount, then I think people are just going to be like, some people will farm it, but I think a lot of people will go onto something else.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. Very helpful insight into the mechanics of the game. I appreciate that's like quite detailed for some people who like might not be as familiar, but the reason why I'm talking about it is because Blast is obviously on people's minds a lot. That seems to be the new shiny game with an inbuilt community that is come over to Blast and is kind of ready to get as much gold as possible. And with gold being so prized and valuable, I guess playing the game should have some kind of positive outcomes for the people trying to get the gold. So I think that's helpful to touch on. Let's move it on though to one of the main topics for today. We've obviously said that the main headline is that ETH is showing a hell of a lot of strength, up another couple of percent, almost at 4K now, just going above 3.9. Just want to have a bit of a discussion here on like what we think is going on. I've got this tweet from someone who I picked up as a follow on a recommendation. This is smartestmoney.eth. So it is a .eth in the name, so probably a little bit of bias on some level, but they are the #1 coin, PNL, and storyteller on the Binance leaderboard. So I'm pretty sure that this is like one of the best traders around. And this is what they shared a few days ago. There's a couple of tweets that I have from them from the last couple of days. The first one was this. They said, "You're telling me that you sat through almost an entire year of ridicule trying to time ETH BTC to give up now when the finish line is within sight. They've gaslighted you to thinking you have a mental illness for believing in ETH They wove magical fairy tales of BTC retail barbells that your neighbors, your family, and friends slap you with daily. Your time for vengeance is now. So this is, I guess, a criticism of the, the barbell thesis that people have been putting out there over and over again, which is like, look, you go for BTC and then you go for memes. You go for BTC, then you go for Solana. Like everyone's always been saying, ETH is lost in the middle, doesn't know what it is. What's the point of it? I've always pushed back against that for a reasonable amount. But this is obviously positioning ETH not lost in the middle as a very strong option. Then just linking it to the ETH ETF stuff, he went on to say this: given the surprise pivot and positioning of market participants coming into this week, I expect decent upside for ETH in the coming weeks. The sentiment tests I conducted yesterday also show a clear consensus of a BTC retail barbell positioning, which will now need to make way for institutional fund flows. If you're not making the transition early, be prepared to FOMO panic in later. Just going to stop there first, Sammy. I've got some more thoughts on this, on ETH's position relative to these other major tokens that we hold. What are your thoughts here on ETH's relative position?
I think as you were reading that out, all I could watch was the video of him with a beer, just doing some gestures and stuff. I was like, what the fuck is this? But I think, I don't think ETH definitely isn't over. Like it's definitely here to stay. I mean, we spoke about the specifics of that, the two different forms. So we're waiting for that S1 approval, and that's when trading can actually go live. And yes, that's when you'll see the institutional demand, but people are obviously going to try and front run that. But I mean, it's pretty much the assumption is that it's going to get approved. You got politicians being pro crypto. You got BlackRock deploying like a huge money market fund on Ethereum. So I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think that, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think he's probably right that over the next 6 to 12 months, we're probably going to see the similar trajectory that we saw on Bitcoin. I mean, that was effectively the same thing. We saw it sell off before it started to rip again. And I know that NFT Stats provided us with that chart last week. So I don't know if you saw that, but it basically showed the pre-ETF approval of Bitcoin and the price action before and after. And whilst ETH doesn't mirror it exactly, like it could effectively follow it. And I know it has different supply dynamics, and it's not capped in terms of supply, whereas Bitcoin is. It's used as well. It's kind of like it's more like a tech play than it is just a digital gold. But ultimately, if there's demand for it, like you would assume that the price is going to eventually go up, because if people are burning it and using it, then it's useful, and it can become this yield generating asset that institutions are actually interested in.
I want to ask a very specific question, because it feels like, I don't know, sometimes on the timeline people think completely different things. I just want to understand what you think about this, and I'll share what I think about this. So like that guy in the YouTube comments has made an interesting point, which is taking one perspective. He said the ETH ETF definitely was not sell the news. Timeline is nowhere near euphoric because 99% of people became Sol maxis. Even Frank pivoted back to Solana right as Sol versus ETH topped. That's funny to watch. So I guess the point that is being made here, I've heard two things. I'm going to present the two things, and I want to know where you stand. I've heard people say ETH can't go up because everyone already holds ETH. Like ETH is like from the last cycle, everyone's already got it. It can't go up as much because everyone's already got a proportion of it. Whereas everyone was clearly sidelined on Solana, right, before. The alternative thing now, which I've seemed to hear people saying, is this perspective, where that 99% of people, which that guy just pointed out in the YouTube comments, 99% of people have become Sol maxis. People might have, I don't know if this is 100% true, this is what I'm trying to find out. People have pivoted so aggressively to the other side. And as part of this, as Smartest Money, the Twitter account, was sharing, like have pivoted to this kind of barbell thesis where you've gone like, right, I'm going to be in Bitcoin, then I'm going to be on Solana /WIF /Memecoins over there. And then ETH gets missed out. So I guess the question I have is, do you subscribe to one of those two? Do you think people do own sufficient ETH to not be sidelined? Or do you think that people are actually sidelined in that respect?
I mean, I know a lot of people hold ETH just because it's useful, and they end up, unless they put it on a ledger, they end up using it for whether it's buying NFTs or whether it's like actually just paying for gas, or so it's a useful asset. I do think there's a lot of people that hold ETH from the last cycle, but I also think it's quite a short-term view to say that everyone holds ETH, therefore the price isn't going to go up, because ultimately over time we don't have those institutions really buying it for those ETFs yet. You don't have, and that will be a huge inflow. And all of a sudden if you have pension funds allocating a small portion, whether it's like a fraction of a percent to ETH specifically,
Sure.
then all of a sudden you're going to have a huge inflow. And I don't think we've yet seen that. We're only starting to see that was it Wisconsin recently with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And there's a few others, but I think like ultimately the sheer amount of capital, we haven't actually seen that hit Bitcoin and ETH properly. And I do think that people like various analysts have projections that it's going to be like a 6-figure Bitcoin this year. Now, why can't that mean that the ETH is going to be a 5-figure balance? So I think like we have a very short-term attention span in crypto. I think we look for the next shiny object. Yes, the ETH ETF has been like preliminary approved, but I think that over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll probably end up seeing ETH grind upwards as people start to price in how much it's actually worth and how much their future projections of institutions accumulating it are. So I think that's my prediction. I don't think we're going to see this. We'll probably see a bit of choppiness around some news, but ultimately, I think that we're going to see this upward trajectory where you have, if you look at the ultrasound money, it might potentially become deflationary over time. And then also you have the additional supply where people are taking it off the market out of circulating supply and locking it up for prolonged periods of time. And I think that combined effect could have like a bit of a squeeze on the price.
Yeah, I wonder whether people are just obsessed from previous cycles because of the way dynamics worked previously. This idea of knowing how much of people on crypto Twitter hold a particular coin as if that is relevant. I think it was obviously very relevant when institutions were not in play, but maybe that's like a hangover from when institutions were not in play. Like now that the game is going to be adjusting and you'll have these very significant additional inflows, I don't know if these types of questions or surveys are as helpful. And what I mean is this is another tweet I'm showing on screen live on YouTube and X on the video side of things. I'll read it out for people watching. But Evan, who's like a prominent ETH tweeter, shared this survey from Arthur, which basically asks, what ETH are you holding as a percentage of your crypto portfolio right now? It got a lot of interaction. Said like 5,800 votes in this survey, so not a small number. Obviously, not a huge number either, but an interesting perspective nevertheless. So they said 0 to 25%, 25 to 50%, 50 to 75%, or 75 to 100%, and the vast majority, almost 50%, were in the 0 to 25% bracket. 21% was in the 25 to 50% bracket, so just a fifth. 50 to 70, and then more than 50% is like 30% of people, 1/3, with only 17% of people holding 75% to 100% in ETH. So it's kind of interesting from that perspective, but I guess what the point that you're making is like the kind of proportions of retail investors, traders is not going to be relevant necessarily long term.
Yeah, exactly. I think when also the people that are doing this poll, I suspect most are going to be the younger age groups on Twitter doing that poll. Whereas if you take that poll more widely across other crypto asset holders and institutions and things like that, it's going to be a far lower amount. So I think from a retail perspective, that makes sense. But I have seen charts of people comparing ETH last bull run and projecting like where they see Sol come this bull run. But I think it's also worth talking about, well, Anatoly speaks about the price of Solana as well. And he's like, well, this isn't supposed to be an appreciating asset. This is supposed to be just a useful crypto token that you use to power the Solana blockchain. And actually the value is going to be on the applications and protocols built on top. So is it a completely different dynamic to ETH? And maybe it will have that short-term price action where it follows ETH in the next bull run. But I think long term, I think it's going to end up diverging a little bit. I don't think it's going to match it one for one.
Okay. Interesting stuff. For me personally, I've definitely been thinking about some of those stats, but because of my time frame and because of my conviction in ETH, I've never been shaken out of it beforehand. Like I did want some Solana exposure back at the beginning when Solana was taking off around $30 and $60. I think I was buying, and then I stopped. But it was never at the expense of ETH because I just found ETH useful. And that's kind of my leading indicator. Is like, what do I actually find useful? And that's one of the ways I kind of maintain some independence of thinking and thought here, because if I find an asset useful and I'm using it and it makes me money, then I want to hold it basically, and that's sufficient. And just a final point on the ETH price itself. This was a very important point that I made the other day, maybe on Thread Guy's show, maybe it might not have been on this one. But like when people talk, and I was speaking about this on the show with Clemente as well on Saturday, when people talk about other assets going up in value and therefore them being better assets, they're talking about the spot price going higher. Like Sol has been better than ETH because it went from 60 to 160 or something, whereas ETH went from 2 to 3K or whatever. Therefore, Sol is better. But the thing that I think is missing from that picture, and maybe Jose in the comments is kind of alluding to this when he says, when you're talking about ETH exposure, you've got to mix spot and NFTs. And the reason why that relates to what I'm saying is because ETH allows you to make money and be profitable in far more ways than just holding spot. So I think a lot of people in crypto are just like, well, this is the best asset because it's going up more. It's like, yeah, okay, on some level, but on ETH, there's far more things. There's far more protocols that you can put the asset into to make money. There are higher quality assets on the NFT side for you to give loans against, for example. That's a pretty important point. Like, yeah, Solana's got Sharkify and you can put stuff in there for particular points in time. But that's does not operate on any level the way things like NFTFi and Gondi and Blend works, because you don't have the quality of assets that people have significantly more trust in. Not saying those assets are perfect either, but the point is those assets are much better. So, and the fact that you can stake ETH, you can restake ETH as well, and then you're getting airdrops from those particular protocols, which have been very big wins for us this year. That's not priced in, right? That's not priced into the quality of the asset, because the number might not go up, but you might be making money in other ways. And I think that's the big thing that people are missing in that respect. Sammy, final reflection on that before we move on.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point about the lending market, because we're starting to see real world assets come on chain and you can actually lend against those. And then there's no risk that you're effectively just doing it against a PFP NFT. And I know that Gondi and some of these other protocols do those loans. But I mean, there's been concern recently, even looking at the price of punks, like them hitting 30 ETH. Like, are they like the stablecoin NFT where they are just at that price forever and in ETH terms, and people are comfortable to lend at a 60% LTV for that? But if all of a sudden those assets become really volatile, then that kind of undermines that whole lending process around that particular asset class. However, if you have real world assets with that physical intrinsic value where you can redeem that asset for the physical, whether it's a Rolex, whether it's something similar, even houses and cars, I suspect soon. But like, if you can do that, then all of a sudden people are going to be wanting the most secure protocol, or like effectively the cheapest protocol, but having that security. And I think ETH has that value proposition. Whereas Bitcoin, it's getting there. It's still pretty archaic. Like the UIs for like Liquidium is very different to that of like Gondi or NFTFi and stuff like that. So I think the development in the ETH ecosystem is so far ahead of these other ones that it becomes very hard for institutions to coming in to not choose ETH and not to back those and build protocols that have this like decentralized finance layer too that they get involved with. And maybe that will get to the stage at some point with Solana and Bitcoin, but I just don't think it's that as far progressed as ETH at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. That's kind of taking my point and just extending it slightly. I agree with that. Okay, let's keep it moving because we've got other points to make today. We've got a couple of other headlines. Obviously, ETH has been ripping, Sam, but also Pepe has absolutely gone ballistic. We don't normally dwell on the meme coins, but we want to touch on them as and when they're relevant. Like Pepe is up. I've got the chart up for the people who are watching in. Like Pepe is up on 7 days, up 75%, up to okay, so when I wrote it, it was basically a $7 billion FDV. Pretty outrageous price action. Like, what do you think is going on here, Sam? Like, is it a little bit of ETH beta? Is it just the fact it's the meme coin of choice on ETH? Like, how does this play out in the next month or two of the rest of summer?
It's definitely the ETH beta, because check the month chart for Turbo, which is that AI. I don't know if you remember, that was the AI play on ETH.
Yeah, I remember.
And that's just gone absolutely parabolic, new all-time highs, and that's on ETH as well. So I think there's a lot of if you go to it looks absolutely insane. I mean, Pepe is pretty insane as well, but yeah, Turbo is just a completely different level. So I think it's the ETH beta play. People are looking for meme coins on ETH. You've got the politicians talking about memes and getting meme officers in to support them to resonate with the younger audience. So, and that probably leads into one of our other topics slightly later on around political meme coins. Like if any of those are on ETH, that to me would strike me as something that people would go after. But yeah, looking at the ETH meme coins like Turbo, Pepe, I mean, it's just absolutely crushed it compared to other stuff in the market at the moment. So that's the only reason I can think of, just the ETH ETF getting approved, and this is on ETH.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely aggressive price action. Like I've just got this Turbo chart that you got me to pull up here is outrageous. So up 1,000% on the month with absolutely no indication as to why someone would pick this one though, right? Like I think one of my key points on the meme coin super cycle that people like to express as something that's going to happen is that I don't think there is such thing as a meme coin super cycle because not every single coin is going to do this. I think certain coins will do this, but that's just crypto. Crypto is a selection of coins going absolutely bananas and other ones just going up and going down very, very quickly. So I'm not so convinced by the meme coin supercycle thesis as it could relate to like multiple coins. But yeah, like Turbo is definitely one completely out of the blue. I don't know where that one has come from. Obviously had a little bit of prominence back in the day, but that's insane. Clearly something going on there, and I guess so. Maybe final question on this, Sam, before we hit the Web3 roundup and then hit the final headline, talk about political meme coins. Final question here is like, do you think this season continues? What do you expect for price action on this respect? Like, is this something you want to play in? Are you maybe going risk off on when it comes to meme coins? What are you thinking?
My focus is on Blast at the moment. I think there's some meme coins on there, but I do think that there's a lot of money to be made in the meme coins on ETH. I think that there will be the political stuff. I think that's probably going to be the sell the news event once the election is done. So your Trump, your Bowden, all of those, I think they'll probably do well coming into the election. But I think each individual meme coin has its own merits. I think there's some sort of, if there's a narrative that it fits in that time, I think it does well into the narrative, and it's just literally tokenized attention. But the moment that shifts, like it soon falls off. Like look at GME on Sol, like that absolutely ripped when Roaring Kitty came back. But now it's down significantly from where it was. So I think a lot of these, it's very volatile and it trades on attention. So I think that if you find a good narrative and it makes sense and it has that wider appeal, then I think it probably will do well. But finding that a low market cap and then holding it for long enough is so difficult to do. I did it reasonably well with Bone, but I nowhere near sold the top. I think I sold half my bag at about 20% of the way in, kept the rest, but then rode it past the Binance thing back down and eventually sold. So it's like, even if you get in early, it's very hard to do that. And I think, sometimes just selling frequently at smaller clips is the easier way, but it's just so difficult to do. And like, for me, it's so stressful and I'd rather do stuff that I'm actually learning and maybe have a small bag that I don't have to worry about, that I have high conviction plays in, and maybe just holding Pepe and having that thesis that it's going to flip, I don't know, WIF or Doge, or which flip WIF, but like SHIB or Doge eventually next cycle. Maybe the attention for that flips the attention previously from these dog coins. So it'd be interesting to see what plays out. And maybe this like political campaign, we might see some one of those coins getting picked, and then all of a sudden it just goes parabolic.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff's fair. And I guess the kind of disclosure, which is everyone is focusing in on a niche thing. And yes, we will report on meme coins and maybe participate in them sometimes, but it's definitely not the way that we make the majority of our money. I don't think so. Good luck to the people who are playing the game. I mean, Mog, shout out to Yell in the YouTube comments as well, just pointing out Mog is also up 50%. So these things are going to happen as the market continues. We'll always shout them out when those things happen. Let's hit the Web3 Roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's happened in the space from the past 24 hours. Also, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top, we'll hit those details and then we'll hit the final headline. So, number one, over the weekend, PacMoon won its third blast jackpot. That is pretty good for those token holders. Number two, Sailor says that the ETF is good for Bitcoin as we are more powerful with the whole crypto industry. This was an interview with Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy, obviously one of the largest Bitcoin holders, who is kind of adjusting his stance on ETH after the ETF news. He'd obviously been quite adamant before that Bitcoin was the only thing that was going to be the main asset, kind of adjusting it to say, well, this is still good for Bitcoin. That's good to hear. Next, ETHify. This is pretty cool. ETHify announces ETHify Cash, which is a credit card which lets you borrow USDC against your ETHify assets. Then you can spend it anywhere in the world. That I thought was pretty cool. Next, Mon by Pixelmon goes live today with expected FDV around $500 million. And I think that is where it is right now. Other couple of bits of news. Cristiano Ronaldo announces his fourth NFT drop on Binance. There'll be some additional utility for this one and previous token holders. And then finally, Caitlyn Jenner's social media hacked with deepfake videos to promote scam coins. I don't really want to talk about that too much today. I know people woke up to like a crazy timeline on this, trying to figure out if it was real or not real. And I don't know, it was pretty insane. But in the end, I guess it was just like, it was very confusing. It was a great deepfake. And it looks like it was a scam. So I think that was the conclusion in the end, although it was actually quite hard to get a definitive take on that. Okay, those are the rest of the final headlines. The very final headline for the day that we want to talk about is, I guess, twofold. First, the big kind of messaging from the Trump team, the Republican team, who are working with Trump, who are very much pushing an aggressively pro-crypto message at the moment. Some of the things they said over the last couple of days was that they will ensure the future of crypto and Bitcoin will be made in the USA. They'll support the right to self-custody to the nation's 50 million crypto holders. He also mentioned freeing Ross, the founder of Silk Road, who's been in jail for a number of years now, and just generally coming out with like very, very pro crypto statements. I guess in some way almost baiting the Democrats. It's just like, look, this is how pro we're going to be. I wonder whether they're going to respond in some way. So maybe that's the first point for discussion. And then the second thing, Sam, is the Uni PC, the unit. I don't know how to pronounce this person's handle, aka the Bonk guy. Had this to say about the Trump meme coins. He said political meme coins will be the greatest wealth creators leading into the US elections. Trump is at an all-time high of 500 million. MAGA is at an all-time high of 90 million. Trump is up 35% and back at a $130 million market cap after all of this weekend of comments. Where do you see this going here, Sam? Do you think this is like a battle between the parties now, like who can become the most pro crypto? And if so, what's the consequence for these coins?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not deep into US politics, being from the UK, but I think just from the sidelines, just seeing them suddenly come out of the woodwork and be pro crypto just seems a bit bit of a coincidence from the timeline perspective. But I do think that it will be a sell the news event once this all happened. Like, what is there left to trade on? Like, what's the anticipation? Like, what's everyone hoping for? So I think that coming into it, I think it will be explosive. I don't know which one's going to do well. I even saw on Blast, like, a bunch of people, like 40,000 wallets got airdropped Trump Cash just out of the blue. So, and that was over the weekend. So, like, I think people are realizing that there's obviously they can make a lot of plays with this, with the politics, because everyone's leaning into it. I don't know which one's going to do well. Like, I've been told so many times from a lot of the Discord groups I'm in that MAGA is the one. But then again, the people telling me might have big bags in MAGA. So therefore, I don't know whether to trust it or not. But
almost certainly.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, like, I think coming into the election, they'll probably continue to do well. I don't know how high they'll go. I think generally memes that are just universally funny outside of a specific event will continue to trade well on that particular attention. But whilst everyone's focused on this, I think this is probably where, especially if they end up endorsing it, right? Like, if one of these politicians endorses one of these tokens, all of a sudden, like, I don't know where that price goes, because everyone's just going to buy it. It's similar to, I think, 2021, there was Mongoose Coin. So one of the senators, I think it was Brad Sherman, was like, oh, Bitcoin is eaten by Ethereum, is eaten by Hamster Coin, is eaten by Mongoose Coin. All of a sudden, Mongoose Coin got listed and it went like, it did like a 500x. So yeah, I think it's literally next to zero now. So I think based off previous cycles and seeing that happen, I think that yes, it will come into doing well coming into like the election, but I think post-election we just literally see it go to zero.
Yeah, it's one of these things where you mentioned, like, what if someone endorsed one of these things? Like, I know it's a kind of it requires a lot of imagination and hopium to think that these things happen, but like at the same time, the U-turn that's happened in American politics in the last, I don't know, last few weeks, been pretty stark, like pretty strong. So
particularly the Ross thing as well. Like, I was surprised by that, because like, you look at the sentencing from him to SBF, and arguably the intent around what happened was worse with SBF, but his sentence was far more lenient. So it's almost like that U-turn, actually, that's probably got a lot of support around the crypto, from like crypto Twitter and some other people within crypto. So it's interesting to see them do that. And I don't know if that is purely for attention. But yeah,
I mean, that's one of the fair things to say, right? Like, to be fair, there's going to be a lot of verbal jousting between both parties and making promises that maybe sometimes people don't keep. It's going to be hard to gauge the veracity of all of these claims and all of those types of things. But I guess at a minimum, one of the core things that we've observed is that it's a part of the conversation now, at least. Like, crypto is part of the conversation. And these political coins is going to be really funny to see how they react to being a part of the conversation as we go through. But look, I'm glad we got to touch on all of the headlines today. Had a full discussion on all of them. Hope you enjoyed the show. As always, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week. We're live on X. We're live on YouTube. You can also catch us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify podcasts. So please do like, comment, subscribe, wherever you need to, wherever you enjoy getting your content. We hope you enjoyed the show today, as always. Please do have a wonderful day, and we will see you again tomorrow. Take care.